Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. My name is Ken Shreve, joined today by Justin Nielsen. On today's show, we'll talk about a stock market. Well, we gave back early gains. Small caps lagged quite a bit ahead of a busy week of economic headlines and earnings reports. Before we get into all that, let's throw it over to Justin, who's got three stocks to watch.
Yeah, we'll take a look at a couple areas of strength, including Splunk, which was also our IBD stock of the day, MercadoLibre, which got an ad on leaderboard, and a setup that I'm seeing here in Lantheus Holdings.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's start by taking a look at a chart of the Nasdaq composite here. Nasdaq, it was up nicely in the morning when that 10-year yield was falling, but then the 10-year yield reversed higher at last check around 3.98%. Nasdaq ends with a loss of 0.1%. So we avoid distribution, but we did see some sellers in the market today, Justin.
Yeah, it's certainly not one of those things you like to see when the market is up nicely, kind of giving you a feeling like everything's rosy and the birds are singing and everything, and then kind of have that rug pulled out from under you. It wasn't necessarily a bad, horrible day, because it was basically flat. But again, there were some good gains. I mean, the Nasdaq Composite was up over 1%. What I do like though is that we have stayed above this 21-day moving average line. That's the green line that's shown on this chart. So both the Nasdaq Composite and S&P 500 stayed above that line, and that's going to be kind of one of the areas that I'm looking at right now to see if this strength can hold. Can it stay above that moving average line? It's a good line to kind of use for short-term strength or weakness.
Okay, you can see the S&P 500, just like the Nasdaq on Friday, moved above all of its short-term moving averages. That prompted us to change our outlook, put the market back on a confirmed uptrend. But the S&P 500 gave back early gains. It closed higher, up 0.1% after finding support at the 200-day moving average. Why don't we go to the Dow Jones, Justin? We'll see that along with the S&P 500, was up 0.1%. Interesting with the Dow Jones, came right up to its 50-day moving average
Yeah.
and got turned away.
Yeah, so that's going to be something to watch there. Does that continue to be an area of resistance? Now, look, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has not been the leading index for a while. It was very strong off that October low. You can kind of see how strong it came up here from October, November, and then it kind of petered out in December. Whereas in January, that's where the Nasdaq really took over, and the Dow lagged significantly. You can see that relative strength line versus the S&P 500 go down in January, and it's really been lagging. If this gets resistance at this level, it's not necessarily a deal breaker if the other indexes can pick up the slack, but it's certainly worth watching that 50-day moving average line for the Dow.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, let's conclude by taking a look at IWM. This is the ETF that tracks the Russell 2000. It had a rough day today, no doubt about it. Down 1.5%, but it's kind of fighting a good battle here as well. Doesn't look as challenged as the Dow does.
Yeah, not as challenged as the Dow, but it did cross below the 21-day moving average line, and this was a little bit of the canary in the coal mine today because it started in rough shape and just got worse. So it was lagging for the whole day. So a lot of times we look at this as kind of a market sentiment to a degree. Risk on, and the Russell 2000 tends to do a little bit better as the appetite for small cap stocks increases. But when investors, especially those large institutions, get a little bit more gun shy, you often see that the Russell 2000 has some trouble as they get into that risk off mode.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, why don't we take a look at 0TNX, which is the 10-year Treasury yield. This is, like I said, it was, last week it gapped above that 4% level. Came down pretty hard Friday, the stock market like that, and then it reversed higher today. So we'll likely see some movement in this 10-year yield depending on what Jay Powell has to say Tuesday and Wednesday when he's testifying about monetary policy on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing to watch, and it'll probably add some volatility here. Now, when we're looking at the 10-year note, remember this is the yields, so it's going to go in the opposite direction of bonds. But yeah, what we're seeing right now is potential reversal here. A lot of strength that we saw last week, and it reversed to the downside, and now we're seeing it kind of reverse potentially to the upside. So if we do see more strength in the yields of the 10-year, you could expect some pressure on stocks. That's what we've been seeing for quite a while, and that's the usual MO.
All right, we got a couple of ETFs we want to look at. I know XME was on your radar. This is the metals and mining ETF.
Yeah, it was a really strong week for it last week, and this was getting into a little bit of trouble today. Look, this is a very broad ETF in terms of having exposure to coal, copper, gold, silver, you name the metal. And it's not just the metals themselves, but also the miners. So you've got Rio, a lot of the big ones in there. So this is something I think that's worth watching. Just a lot of excitement I think happened with some of China news last week, reopening and what that's doing for the economy, signs that there's a lot of strength and growth happening there, and a lot of these industrial stocks will benefit if that's the case. So it's worth watching. If that case doesn't kind of pan out, or if there's some weakness there. We were talking on IBD Live today how a lot of tangibles are getting a little bit more traction, at least last week. But we'll have to see. Is there going to be some sector rotation here? And can some of these things hold, or is it one of those cases where you saw some strength and it's not going to last?
All right, let's take a look at XLK as well, because tech stocks were doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Goldman Sachs got an upgrade from, Apple got an upgrade from Goldman Sachs, I should say, and that lifted XLK for a while. But you can see the XLK looks a lot like the Nasdaq. Just couldn't hold on to that gain. Still up 3 up sessions in a row, but sellers in this ETF as well. Even though Apple had a pretty good day.
Yeah, and this was really a kind of a driving force for the gains. Still up almost 0.5% for the day, but guess what? It was matched by XLU. That's the utilities, and while the utilities have been definitely not in favor lately, it was one of the leading sectors today, along with the staples, XLP, the consumer staples. So both XLU and consumer staples are considered a little bit more on the defensive side. So along with the IWM going down, these going up, that is kind of giving a little bit of a defensive picture. But remember, that's just one day. So it's not too much to panic about for one day, but we'll have to watch and see if that is something that starts to trend.
Very good. Well, why don't we take a look at some individual stocks here that you mentioned at the start of the video, and we'll start with SPLK, Splunk, seeing some enterprise software stocks starting to show signs of life, making a pretty good case for a bottom here. But what do you see about SPLK that you like, Justin?
Well, what I really like is how this came down in a very orderly way. There was a little bit of volume here, but that also was corresponding to an earnings announcement. So that's not too atypical, but it really got some tight closes in here. Now, remember, it's worth kind of noting what some of these moves were. I'm going to switch to the track price, and you can see that while some of this action looks pretty tight, I mean, this was a day that was down 2%. Here we had a day that was, I mean, it doesn't look like much, but it was up 1%. And, a lot of these days had, 1% moves plus. But overall, this tight action, it looked like a resistance to going down anymore. And you certainly had some very big action last week on the earnings report. On the second, you had a big move down all the way to the 50-day moving average line, but it came back and kind of closed in that same area. So I was kind of looking at this as a, clearing this early resistance here, maybe even a downtrend as we kind of draw a line right here. So it's right there, holding above it. There wasn't too much volume today compared to the last 3 days, but it was still above average. So I think this one is worth watching. If you want some information about the company itself, Brian Deegan wrote a really great IBD Stock of the Day article on it, and then we also added this to Swing Trader early this morning.
Yeah, I think you can see Brian's story on Splunk still right on the homepage of investors.com. All right, next up is going to be MercadoLibre, MELI. You mentioned this is a leaderboard stock. We first put it on the leaders list back February 14th, and we actually increased the position today thanks to this really strong move over the 1250 level.
Yeah, so that initial buy right there was at the support of the 21-day moving average line. We got into it a little bit ahead of earnings, and this is one of those where we were rolling the dice a little bit. We only had like a quarter position here, so it
Right.
wasn't too much risk. And even though we didn't have as much cushion as we would have liked, it actually ended up panning out for us. And now, if you kind of switch to the weekly chart, you can see that this was a flat base here. So we have the first week, you count that as the first week down. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all you need for a flat base. It can be shorter at 5 weeks. The depth was only 13%. And what we were seeing today was a breakout from that flat base. So this seemed like a good time to add to that position. We already had a pretty low average cost from that bounce off the 21-day moving average line. And so adding here keeps our average cost fairly low, not getting too carried away here, but the flat base kind of reset things and gave us a new entry.
Yeah, remember, it's always earnings growth that is the main driver of a stock's price, and you can look at recent earnings growth at MercadoLibre. It's got the revenue growth as well, so this one really checks a lot of boxes from a fundamental and technical perspective. So weekly chart still looks good here. You can see that blue dot at the end of the relative strength line that is poking into new high ground, which is confirming MercadoLibre's strength. So let's finish up by talking about Lantheus. This is a stock that was on our radar for a long time, and then it kind of went into this, pretty hairy correction, and then kind of found its bottom. And then they had a great earnings report. I think it was just a couple of weeks ago that powered the stock through the 40-week moving average here.
Yeah, hairy correction is right. I mean, this was down 46% from its highs. And again, this was something that was holding up really well in most of 2022 while the market was going down. Just look at that relative strength. So this correction here was pretty brutal. But as you mentioned, that earnings report a couple weeks ago shot up the stock 20%. And what's interesting here is while we haven't gone up too much more, we've really held those gains. This just has not wanted to come down. So whenever I see a stock that does that, it makes me think that if the moving average lines can kind of catch up, find some support there, then this could be another opportunity to get into this stock. So I'm kind of looking for it to tighten up here. Again, there was some brutal action on the downside here, some really big days. I mean, look at this day right here. That's just that would
Yeah.
be no fun to sit through. But if we can get tight action here, I think that'll kind of turn the look for this. And while medical products, that area has been a little bit, out of favor, not as much as it was. It still is number 52 out of 197, and there's a lot of stocks in that area that are looking pretty promising. But there has been some volatility. I mean, just look at Dexcom today, which is another one in that area, which had kind of an 8% drop, and this has had some recent volatility as well. But the overall group is doing fairly well still, and I think is worth monitoring.
Well, no doubt, LNTH, that positive response to earnings, and like you mentioned, it really is just holding on to these gains, and we get a little more sideways movement here. Could get a new entry if this market uptrend can sustain itself. All right, three great stocks here: Splunk, MercadoLibre, and Lantheus. Thank you, Justin, so much for your insight as usual. That'll do it for today's show. We do have Jerome Powell starting testimony tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time. I believe he's in front of the Senate on Tuesday and the House on Wednesday. I think I got that right, but market will be listening closely to what he has to say. We also have that jobs report on Friday. So
Right.
tomorrow, David Ryan will be our guest on IBD Live. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go to investors.com/IBD Live, and you can check out what we do. We start 10 minutes before the market open every day, go about an hour 15, hour 20 minutes into the market open, discussing actionable stocks. Always like getting David Ryan's insight. He's our normal Tuesday guest, so please join us tomorrow. That'll do it for today, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. I'll be here with Ed. Have a great afternoon, everybody.